Politics is all about power, and anyone who says otherwise is denying reality. When it comes to it, everything in politics comes down to this series of questions. Who is in power? How did they get that power? For whose advantage do they exercise that power? Who holds them accountable for doing so? How can we get rid of them if they fail? Are there any real alternatives available to those in power? If not, why not? And for anybody who recognizes the influence of Tony Benn on what I've just said, well, I recognize that influence and acknowledge it. The point is that in 2024, assuming somewhat simplistically that we have a functioning democracy, even though we clearly haven't, the three key questions in that list are: for whose advantage do those in government exercise their power? Are real alternatives available to those in power? And if not, why not? Our problem is, in a nutshell, that almost everywhere we look in the current political system in the UK, the answers to these questions is serving the interests of the already wealthy. This is true of the Tories, Labour, the Lib Dems, and Reform. All of those are undoubtedly structured to service that one interest group, who are a tiny minority within the UK. It's also at least partly true of the SNP, unfortunately, because they showed under Nicola Sturgeon's leadership a decided bias towards those with wealth. But it's not true, in my opinion, of the Greens or Plaid Cymru. So we have a decided imbalance of power in the UK, where most of the political parties, who will be sending most of the MPs to the next Parliament, are heavily biased in serving the interests of the wealthy. Now that, of course, also means that there's a corollary, which is that they must not be serving the interests of everyone else, because this is pretty much a binary decision. You can't serve the interests of the wealthy and then also serve the interest of everyone else, let alone the poorest. So the Tories, Labour, Lib Dems and Reform are all definitely not acting in the interests of most people in this country. The SNP might be, might not be. We can only say for certain that the Greens and Plaid Cymru are working in the interests of the majority of people in this country who are on moderate or low incomes. In that case, what I've already answered is the second question. There are no real alternatives at present to most of the parties in power in the UK. Most offer the same bias towards those with wealth and against the interests of most people in this country. They might seek to deny that, but as a result, we end up with what I might call a democratic facade. But what that means is we end up with a situation where there is no real choice, but there is a pretense that there is. Those with power rule the roost. They have captured politics, and most especially the parties who are most likely to be in power are creating a political void where ordinary people are simply not getting a look in. They're being asked to decide between policies and parties, all of whom want to serve the interests of the wealthy, and no one, except as I've noticed the Greens and some of the nationalists, want to represent the interest of ordinary people in UK politics. Is it surprising as a result that people feel disenchanted with politics and think that it does nothing for them? The question is, what can be done about this? Well, that's going to be the theme for future videos. But right now, it is important to recognise that this is potentially the biggest issue in UK politics, and almost no one is talking about it.